The morning of the settlement conference, Harlow Sinclair wore a dress she'd bought for $12 at a Salvation Army on Route 9, and she wore it on purpose. It wasn't because she couldn't afford better. It was because she wanted them to see exactly what they expected to see. The waiting area outside courtroom 7B in the Cook County Courthouse smelled the way all government buildings smell: recycled air, old carpet, and the particular tension of people who are losing something. Harlow sat on a wooden bench with her hands folded in her lap and a legal pad on her knees that had exactly 3 lines written on it. No laptop. No briefcase. No attorney seated beside her. She heard them before she saw them. Is that her? A woman's voice, low but designed to carry. My God, she actually came by herself. Harlow didn't look up. The voice belonged to Sutton Everett. Soon to be Sutton Kellerman again, God willing, according to the monogram luggage she'd already ordered. She was 38, veneers perfect, blowout fresh, wearing a silk blouse that cost more than Harlow's monthly rent had been when she first moved to Chicago. On Sutton's arm was Harlow's husband, or the man who had been her husband for 4 years, Owen Kellerman. He was handsome in the way that expensive watches are handsome, polished, purposeful, and fundamentally decorative. Behind them walked a man Harlow did recognize. Preston Hale of Hale, Croft & Associates, one of the 3 most aggressive divorce attorneys in Illinois. He had a reputation for turning straightforward asset divisions into scorched earth campaigns. Owen had retained him 6 weeks ago. She doesn't even have representation, Owen said just loud enough. He wasn't whispering, he was performing. He glanced back at Preston with the expression of a man who has already won and is simply waiting for the paperwork. I almost feel bad. Don't, Sutton said, laughing softly. She chose this. Harlow finally looked up. She met Owen's eyes for exactly 2 seconds. She said nothing. She looked back down at her legal pad. What they saw was a 29-year-old woman in a thrift store dress with 3 lines written on a notepad: no lawyer, no strategy, and no future. What they saw confirmed every story Owen had been telling about her for the last 8 months. That Harlow was passive, that she was directionless, that she was, in his words to his mother, a sweet girl who never really amounted to anything. They didn't see the truth. They didn't know that the woman on that bench had, under her birth name Harlow Sinclair, co-founded a biomedical data analytics firm called Meridian Health Intelligence at the age of 24. They didn't know that she had quietly sold her controlling interest in that company 18 months ago for $63 million, structured through a blind trust managed out of Boston. Before she had ever walked down the aisle with Owen Kellerman, they didn't know she'd kept the money separate because a very good attorney, not Preston Hale, had advised her to, and because somewhere in the back of her mind she had always known that marrying Owen was something she was doing out of love, but that love, in his case, had an expiration date. She had spent 4 years being Owen's wife, attending his firm's dinners, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, deferring to his opinions on restaurants and vacation destinations, and whether her hair looked better down or up. She had done it because she loved him, and then she had kept doing it because she was grieving the version of him she had loved, and, by the time she admitted to herself that the man she'd married had been replaced somewhere along the way by the man sitting across from Sutton at business dinners, she had already been erased from her own life. When Owen filed for divorce, he cited irreconcilable differences. His attorney's first move was to freeze the joint accounts and file for an emergency order claiming Harlow had hidden assets. He was not wrong about the hidden assets. He was very wrong about what they were. Harlow. Owen appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. He crouched down slightly, the way people do when they're trying to appear reasonable in front of witnesses. You can still accept the offer. $60,000 in the car. You walk away clean. No court, no public record. Just sign. $60,000. He was offering her $60,000. I appreciate the offer, Harlow said. Her voice was steady. I'll see you inside. Owen straightened. He looked at Preston. Something passed between them, a confirmation that she was going to make this difficult and that it didn't matter, because difficult didn't mean she would win. They didn't know that in approximately 15 minutes, a woman named Dr. Josephine Strand, senior partner at Strand & Beckett, would walk through the main entrance of the Cook County Courthouse. Dr. Strand did not practice family law. She practiced corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, and trust litigation. She was 61 years old, had argued before the 7th Circuit 4 times, and did not take cases that were beneath her. She was taking this one because Harlow had asked her to, and because Harlow had been her client for 5 years, and because Dr. Strand had a very particular feeling about men who offered women $60,000 to disappear from their own lives. The courtroom was the color of old institutions, Pale green walls, fluorescent lighting, a judge's bench that sat high enough to remind everyone in the room of the relevant power dynamic. The Honorable Rosalind Park presided. She was known in legal circles for two things: extraordinary patience and zero tolerance for anyone who wasted it. Owen and Preston occupied the right side of the room. Preston had arranged his documents with the deliberate confidence of someone staging a crime scene. Owen sat back in his chair with his legs crossed, his jaw relaxed, his posture the physical embodiment of a man who had already moved on. Sutton was in the gallery behind him. She wasn't supposed to be. The Harlow sat alone at the left table. Legal pad, ballpoint pen, nothing else. Judge Park looked over her reading glasses. Mr. Kellerman is represented by counsel. Miss Sinclair, you are appearing pro se? Yes, Your Honor. Harlow stood. I am. Preston rose from his chair, already buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, the petitioner's position is straightforward. Miss Sinclair contributed no financial assets to this marriage. She had no income during the marriage, no independent assets, and has made no documented contribution to the marital estate. We are asking for a full affirmation of the prenuptial agreement and an order that the respondent vacate the marital residence within 30 days. The prenuptial agreement was signed under conditions I'd like to address, Harlow said quietly without standing. Preston smiled. Your Honor, she has no legal training, no representation, and a handwritten notepad. With respect, I would ask that the court proceed efficiently. Judge Park looked at Preston with an expression that was not unkind but was very flat. Mr. Hale, the respondent may speak. Harlow stood. Thank you, Your Honor. I understand that Mr. Hale is arguing that I brought nothing to this marriage. I'd like to let the court know that I'm prepared to agree. But not for the reasons he thinks. The room was quiet. Owen, Preston said under his breath, a warning. Something about Harlow's stillness was wrong in a way he could not yet identify. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Dr. Josephine Strand walked in. She was not a dramatic woman, but her presence was. She was tall, silver-haired, in a charcoal suit that had been tailored to fit with military precision. She carried a single briefcase, black, unbranded, and she moved through the center aisle of the courtroom with the unhurried confidence of someone who had been in much more important rooms than this one. Your Honor, she said, reaching the bar, I apologize for my late arrival. I am Dr. Josephine Strand of Strand and Beckett, Chicago and New York. I am entering my appearance on behalf of the respondent. Preston Hale turned slowly. His face did not change, but Owen's did. Judge Park looked at the attorney over her glasses for a long moment. Dr. Strand, I've read your briefs before. Take your seat. Thank you, Your Honor. Harlow didn't smile. She sat down. Under the table, she exhaled once slowly. Sutton in the gallery leaned forward. Owen turned in his seat. Who is that? He whispered to Preston. Preston did not answer right away. He was looking at the briefcase Dr. Strand had placed on the table. He was looking at the documents she was removing with the systematic calm of someone who had been preparing them for months. She's very good, Preston said carefully. This changes things. Change things how? Owen hissed. She's nobody. Harlow is nobody. Your Honor, Dr. Strand said, rising. I'd like to enter into evidence documentation regarding the respondent's premarital assets, specifically the trust records for the Sinclair Meridian Trust, established November 2019, 7 months before the Kellerman marriage. Preston stood. Objection. This is not relevant to the prenuptial. It is directly relevant, Dr. Strand said, because my client's premarital assets were not disclosed to opposing counsel because they were under no legal obligation to disclose assets held in a blind trust prior to marriage. Mr. Kellerman's attorney filed a motion alleging hidden marital assets. I am here to demonstrate that there are no hidden marital assets. The assets in question predate the marriage entirely. Judge Park looked at the documents. She read for 60 seconds. Her expression did not change, but something around her eyes shifted. Mr. Hale, she said without looking up. Would you like a few minutes to review this documentation? Preston moved to the table. He picked up the first document. He looked at it. He turned to the second page. Harlow watched him read and saw the exact moment, the precise identifiable moment, when Preston Hale realized what kind of case he was actually in. He set the document down. He turned to Owen. Owen was already looking at him, expecting the chance, expecting reassurance, expecting the expression that said this is fine, we've handled this. What he got was something different. What he got was the very careful face of a man recalculating. Your Honor, Preston said. I would request a brief recess, denied. Judge Park said. We will proceed. Dr. Strand, please continue. Dr. Strand stood. She buttoned her jacket once, a small precise motion. Your Honor, the Sinclair Meridian Trust holds the proceeds of the sale of Meridian Health Intelligence, a biomedical data firm co-founded by my client in 2018 and sold in October 2022. The trust predates the marriage by 7 months. The funds were never commingled with marital assets. My client lived on a modest salary from a separate consulting arrangement throughout the marriage and kept her premarital assets fully segregated as per Illinois statute. Mr. Kellerman's assertion that she has hidden marital assets is factually incorrect. There are no marital assets concealed. What my client has is premarital wealth that is entirely hers under the law. The courtroom was quiet. Owen stood up. That's impossible. His voice cracked slightly. She didn't have. Where would she? Mr. Kellerman, Judge Park said, sit down. He sat. She told me she was a freelance health data consultant, Owen said, turning to Preston, his voice low and rapid and unraveling. She said she made $40,000 a year. She drove a Honda Civic. She coupon clipped. She asked me if we could skip the vacation last summer because of money. Your Honor, Dr. Strand continued, with the measured quality of someone who has heard all of this before and has no interest in it, we are not contesting the prenuptial agreement. My client signed it knowingly and has no interest in Owen Kellerman's assets. His firm, his investment accounts, or the marital residence. She is entitled to them. What we are contesting is the motion to compel disclosure of my client's premarital trust, which is not subject to this proceeding. Additionally, we are filing a counter-motion regarding the unauthorized credit inquiries Mr. Kellerman made using my client's Social Security number during the marriage, a matter that has been referred to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. The room gasped. Credit inquiries? Owen's composure collapsed entirely. That's a lie, that's a fabrication. We have the Equifax poll history and the IP address of the device used. Dr. Strand said calmly, would you like to see the report? Owen turned to Preston. Preston said nothing. Preston was already thinking about exit strategies, about how to minimize the exposure, about the very clear fact that the man he'd thought he was representing in a simple asset squabble had just been revealed as someone who had run unauthorized credit checks on his wife, using her personal identification, and who had, apparently, been married to a woman worth $63 million and had not known it. This was no longer a divorce proceeding. Judge Park set down her pen. She looked at the room over her reading glasses with the expression of a woman who had seen most things but still occasionally encountered a new one. I am granting a continuance on the full proceedings pending review of the Kellerman credit inquiry matter by the state's attorney. I am also issuing a protective order for the Sinclair Meridian Trust documents. They are premarital and not subject to disclosure. She looked at Owen directly. Mr. Kellerman, I strongly suggest you have a conversation with your attorney. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. The sound of it was like a door slamming on a chapter. Sutton, in the gallery, was already on her phone. Whether she was calling someone to tell them what happened, or Googling whether it was too late to return the monogrammed luggage was unclear. Owen sat frozen. Preston was already packing his documents. He did not look at Owen. He did not speak to him. He was doing the math on what this had just become. Harlow stood, gathered her legal pad, and turned to Dr. Strand. The car? Ready outside, Dr. Strand said, clicking her briefcase shut. We have the noon meeting with the data firm in Evanston. They walked out of the courtroom together, through the heavy double doors, into the corridor where the fluorescent lights hummed and clerks moved past with armloads of files. Harlow didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, under a pale November sky, a car was waiting. It was a dark gray sedan. Not a Rolls-Royce, not a town car with flags, just a clean, discreet vehicle with a driver who held the door open without making eye contact. Harlow got in. Dr. Strand followed. He had no idea, Dr. Strand said as the car pulled into traffic. No, Harlow said. She was watching the courthouse through the window. He proposed to the version of me he thought he was getting. He thought he was getting someone he could define. When he figured out he couldn't do that, he started looking for ways to take something. The credit inquiries were sloppier than I expected from someone of his background. He panicked, Harlow said simply. He started making moves when he realized I wasn't going to fight him the way he expected. He thought silence meant weakness. He thought the dress meant poverty. He thought I brought nothing because I never showed him what I had. She paused. He forgot that I showed him exactly what I wanted him to see. The car moved through downtown Chicago toward the expressway. In the back seat, Harlow changed out of the thrift store dress. She had a meeting to get to and a different version of herself to be. Not a different self. The same self she had always been, just no longer undercover. What Owen Kellerman would learn over the following weeks, through his attorney, through the court filings, through the various calls Preston Hale began making to mitigate the credit inquiry situation, was that the woman he had dismissed as a non-entity had spent their entire marriage building something that dwarfed anything he had ever imagined. Meridian Health Intelligence, the company she co-founded in a sublet office in Wicker Park when she was 24, had developed proprietary software for predictive hospital resource allocation. 4 years after she and her co-founder built the first working model on 2 laptops and a whiteboard full of statistics, a healthcare conglomerate had acquired them for $63 million. She had been quiet about it because she had wanted to be sure of something first. She had wanted to be sure she could be loved for herself, not for the number. She had walked into the marriage with clean hands and an open heart. And she had watched slowly as Owen revealed what he actually valued, which was the feeling of being the most important person in any room, including the ones they shared at home. He had not been cruel in the dramatic way. He had been cruel in the ordinary way, which is harder to name and harder to leave. He took credit for decisions she'd guided. He talked over her at dinners with his partners and then told her later, privately, that she'd embarrassed him by not speaking up. He introduced her to people as my wife, without her name, as if the title was the relevant information. He suggested, gently and then not so gently, that maybe her ideas about returning to work were premature. That they didn't need the money, that it would be easier. That she should just enjoy the life they had. She had tried to enjoy it. She had tried for 2 years before she understood that what he meant by the life they had was specifically the life in which he was the person who mattered. And she was the pleasant, educated, agreeable backdrop. When she filed for divorce, she filed first, quietly, on a Tuesday morning in March, and Owen only found out when he was served. His first response had been shock and then anger and then the systematic project of making her small enough that leaving would feel like punishment. It had not worked. The state's attorney's inquiry into the unauthorized credit checks moved faster than Owen's attorney anticipated. Preston Hale, to his credit, had advised Owen to cooperate fully and to understand that the exposure here was not primarily financial, it was criminal. Owen had accessed Harlow's credit file using her personal information during the marriage without her knowledge or consent. Illinois had very specific statutes about that. What he had thought was a clever tactical move, trying to prove she had hidden income by pulling her credit history, had become a liability that made the $63 million trust look almost secondary. Owen settled. There was no trial. The settlement terms were confidential, but the ones that were not were these. He retained the marital residence and all of his own assets, because Harlow had never wanted any of them. She walked away with her trust intact, untouched, and the quiet understanding that nothing he had done had worked. Sutton sent a text 4 days after the courthouse. It said, "I think we both know this wasn't what we expected. I hope you're okay." Harlow read it once and did not respond. She did not block the number. She simply moved on because moving on was, at this point, something she had gotten very good at. What Harlow did with the months that followed surprised the people who expected her to disappear, which, to be fair, was most of the people who had known her as Owen's wife. She did not disappear. She became visible, but on her own terms and slowly enough that each appearance felt earned rather than announced. She re-entered the health tech space under Sinclair Meridian Ventures, a seed-stage fund she launched with a former colleague from the Meridian days, a software engineer named Kwame, who had been one of the original 5 employees, and had, like Harlow, been quietly watching the industry shift in ways that opened new doors. SMV wrote its first check in January to a 26-year-old founder in Detroit who had built a remote diagnostic tool for rural cardiology practices. By April, the portfolio had 6 companies. By October, one of them was in due diligence with a major hospital network. She was not on the Forbes list yet. She was not interested in the Forbes list yet. She was interested in the work, which had always been the point, and which she had set aside for long enough. The moment she understood it was over. The grieving, the recalibration, the long interior process of deciding who she was now and what she was willing to do about it came on an unremarkable Wednesday evening. She was in her office on the 14th floor of a building in River North, the one she'd signed a lease on in August, and she was looking out at the city at dusk. The lake was dark and flat. The lights were coming on. Her phone buzzed with a message from Kwame. The Detroit founder had signed the term sheet. The fund's first real exit from a follow-on round was confirmed. She didn't celebrate. She sat there for a minute and felt, very specifically, that she was in the right room. Not performing being in the right room, not tolerating the wrong one. Actually, correctly, solidly placed. She picked up her phone and called her mother, who lived in Asheville and who had never, not once, understood why Harlow married Owen Kellerman. "I'm good," Harlow said when her mother asked. "I'm really good." She meant it. The last time she heard Owen's name was in December, at an industry dinner she attended as a panelist. Someone mentioned the Kellerman Group in passing, Owen's firm, and noted that they'd had a difficult year. lost 2 major clients after the state's attorney situation had, despite everyone's best efforts, leaked in the particular way that things leak in the Chicago legal and financial community. No one connected it to her. She was there as Harlow Sinclair, founder, investor, panelist, not as a wife, not as an ex-wife, not as anyone's backdrop. She answered 3 questions from the moderator, shook 15 hands, declined 2 dinner invitations and went home. She drove herself. The Honda Civic was gone. She'd donated it in September. But the car she drove now was still quiet, still sensible, still chosen for the reasons things should be chosen. Because it was well made and unpretentious and got her where she was going without announcing her arrival. She had learned, in the year since the courthouse, that she did not need to announce her arrival. She had learned this in the marriage actually, though it had taken a while to understand it as a lesson rather than a loss. The years she had spent being invisible to Owen had not actually made her invisible. They had simply given her the uninterrupted best seat to become exactly who she needed to be next. He had thought the quiet dress was a confession. He thought her stillness was defeat. He forgot, or never knew, that the most dangerous person in any room is usually the one who has nothing to prove and already knows exactly what they have.